everyone, welcome to the show. Well, before I introduce my guest, I want to read something to you. And I'm going to be stumbling over the words because the print is so tiny, but here goes. Patrick Johnson, he was a researcher for the Canadian Council on Social Development, researched into the 60s scoop. And here is some of what he found. The process began in 1951 when amendments to the Indian Act gave the provincial jurisdiction over Indigenous child welfare, where none existed federally. So by the 1960s, after nearly a century living under devastating federal policies, such as the Indian Act and residential schools, many Indigenous communities, particularly those living on reserve, were, rampant with poverty, high death rates, and social economic barriers. Now remember, this was under control of the government, okay? With no additional resources, provincial agencies in 1951 inherited a litany of issues surrounding children welfare in Indigenous communities. With many communities underserviced, under-resourced, and under the control of the Indian Act, provincial child welfare agencies chose to remove children from their homes rather than provide community resources and support. From the 60s to the 1980s, provincial government considered the removal of Indigenous children the fastest and easiest way of addressing Indigenous child welfare issues. In many cases, the child welfare system did not expect or require social workers to have specific knowledge about or training in Indigenous child welfare. They also did not have them to seek the consent of communities to scoop newborn and young children from their parents and place them into non-Indigenous homes. It was only under the Child and Family and Community Service Act in 1980 that the social workers were required to notify band councils of a child's removal from the community. So there's a lot more to this article, by the way, but I just want to give you a little idea of what was going on at that time. So here's my guest today is Eugene Victor. He's a friend of mine. He's been on the show twice before. He is a business owner. He owns two businesses, actually. But today he's going to talk about this, he's going to talk about the 60s scoop because he was part of that. So now you were put in foster care, correct?
Yeah, I was about 3 years old, I believe. I actually ever received my records because they don't like to give them out.
Yeah. Now, you have brothers and sisters?
Yeah.
Were they also placed in the...
Our whole family was taken away.
Were you put together or were you all separated?
We were all separated. Some were together, like I was with my brother for a very, very short time. But other than that, I think the sisters, a couple of them were together, but not all of them. There was 7 of us that were taken away.
So how long were you in
Well, actually 8.
Oh,
one sister was adopted.
Right. That's another thing that I didn't get into because a lot of the children were adopted out into mostly non-Indigenous families.
That's right.
So how long were you in the system?
Apparently, we were supposed to be in until we were 19. They keep saying 18. I don't know why, but it was actually 19. But I ran away when I was 18. I didn't like it anymore. I was actually running a farm by myself. They didn't give me no money. They didn't pay me. We didn't even get family allowance when we were kids. So I was running a farm, and I thought, well, when I turn 18 or 19, I'm going to get kicked out anyway, so I wanted to leave on my terms, so I moved out and went to work, and I go, if I could run a farm, I may as well get paid to do it.
Yeah. Were you ever in a home run by an Indigenous family, or was that always non?
They were always non-native.
And were there other native, other than when you were with some of your family members, were there other Indigenous kids with you?
In one foster home, because I was in quite a few,
Okay.
in one foster home there was another native. He was from Winnipeg.
So, how were you treated in those homes?
Well, they were all very, very bad. You could tell that they were only in it for the money. you knew that you weren't part of the family because they made that clear the way they treated us. Or one home, we actually didn't even call them mom or dad; we called them by the first name. There were just so many things that I don't even know where to start, but there were so many things that showed that we knew that we weren't part of the family,
Right.
and they made it very, very clear that we weren't.
Now, you mentioned to me we had this conversation one time about Christmas gifts, for instance.
Oh,
Right? What
right.
would you receive compared to what the white children would get as gifts?
Well, one foster home, I was 6, and they gave me a Hot Wheels set, which I thought was really, really nice because never really ever got gifts before. And that was the only time.
Oh, wow.
After that, they said that I was too old, that I didn't need anything, and I go, well, I'm 6, and then I turned 7, and also I don't get Christmas gifts.
Yeah.
So they only bought me one Christmas gift, and then they bought me an Easter gift once because I was going to a riding ranch for Easter break, and they didn't want me to be the only kid without Easter candy because it would make them look bad.
Right.
And then when I moved out really, really close to my birthday, and the same thing, they didn't want to look bad at the new foster home I was going to, so they gave me $10 for my birthday. But they gave me one Christmas gift, one Easter gift, and one birthday gift. And believe it or not, that was actually one of the nicer homes I was in.
Wow. So, do you know, did they ever tell you why you were moved from one home to another?
When I left that home, I went to a group home, what they called it, was a group home in Vancouver. And they said that I was in many, many, many foster homes, and that I would just stay in this one until I aged out. So that was sort of like a perk, I guess.
Okay.
But that home, like when you were asking about gifts and stuff, for Christmas they would give us toothpaste, soap, nail clippers, hairbrush, basically the necessities of life.
Things that they should have provided anyway.
Yeah, that's what we would get for Christmas.
Wow, okay.
You know, we'd get a sock and they would throw everything in there, the nail clippers and the soap and the toothpaste and the toothbrush and underarm deodorant and stuff. But that's what we got for Christmas.
During all of those years, did you ever go home to visit your family, your parents?
When I was about 16, I insisted that they tell me where I was from.
Oh, wow.
Because they wouldn't even tell me where I was from. Like, you were mentioning the difference between the natives and the non-natives.
Yes.
Well, that one foster home had both native and non-native kids. Well, they all got to go home at Christmas to be with their families, but we weren't allowed.
Okay.
And when you're sitting there watching other kids going home and they're coming back with presents and goodies and stuff, and we didn't get nothing. So I think it was about 16, and I got really upset, and I said, either you tell me where I'm from and who my dad is, because I didn't even know who my dad was.
Okay.
And I said, if you don't tell me, I'm going to run away. And I never did run away. I just dealt with and put up with whatever they did to me. You know, there's a lot of mental abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse.
Yeah.
I was abused in every way possible.
Right.
And I just dealt with it and put up with it. But when I was 16, I said, well, you've got to tell me where I'm from or who my dad is.
Yeah.
And if you don't, I'll run away. And they were being sarcastic, and they said, what were you going to do? Just go ask any Indian if they know you? And I go, well, actually, that's the only plan I had. Was I knew I was from Chilliwack, and that was all I knew.
Okay.
So I was going to run to Chilliwack, because I was actually living in Vancouver then. And I said I would run away to Chilliwack, and I would just go up to any Indian I saw. Well, I go by Indian, I don't go by first name.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, yeah.
I would just go up to any Indian that I saw, and I'd ask if he knew me or my dad. That's how desperate I was to find out who I was. And as young as I was, they knew that I was serious. So they started to break me into my family. They introduced me to my dad and one of my uncles, and they would take me out for lunch, and then they would tell me stories about my family.
Yeah.
But they always made it seem like they're doing me a favor, or they were saving my life, or they didn't really tell the truth on being abducted and taken away.
Yeah, of course not.
They made it sound like it was a favor, or they were helping me.
Right. I tried to find out, and I couldn't find any information, why it was mostly put into, well, as far as I know, Indigenous, like white children, Indigenous children were put in with white families, and it's like, well, gee, white people are so much better raising kids, right? Sarcastically. You
Well,
know, I
actually,
couldn't
what
find that.
it was, like the statement you read is what the government puts out.
Yes, yes,
Well, what it was the residential thing was coming to an end, and they knew what was going on in the residential school, so they go, well, we got to kind of get away from that before people find out or before it gets too big. So that's when they started doing this, what they called the 60 scoop.
right, okay.
So all it is it was still, they wanted to assimilate us, they wanted to break our families up, because they literally had no reason to take any of the kids away, or most of the kids, they had no reason at all to take them away.
Yes, it said that further on.
My dad was a logger and a commercial fisherman, so it isn't that we were poverty or poor.
Right,
Also, the other thing is we have different standards.
yeah,
You know, we're not all about greed, or we're not all about money and power. We're about loving and caring for each other and stuff like that. So we weren't poverty at all.
I did find that somewhere. I was reading an article where just what you said, the standards were different. When you come into my home, you can see it as a white person's home, or like somebody of colonial descent's home, right? Which is not the way, necessarily the way you live,
Yeah.
right? So, but here I come, I'm with the social welfare system, and I look and I'm thinking, whoa, we don't live like that, so something's got to be wrong. This is exactly what they were doing, and they had the authority to do so, right? You know, it's interesting because when I mentioned this, the 60 scoop to somebody, they said, well, why did the parents, like your parents, why did they allow it? But what people didn't understand is your parents were considered wards of the state. Your parents had no rights.
Well, actually, what it was is they didn't know that they could fight back.
Yeah,
If there's any resistance, they would actually go to your house with the police and take you away.
right.
There are very, very, very few people I know personally that didn't get taken away to residential school or a 60 scoop, and that was because their dad stood on the porch with a gun and said, "Try and take my kid."
Right,
But there's very, very few that I know of that didn't go, and that was because their parents really, literally put up a fight, like with weapons and everything, to say you can't take my kid.
right.
But a lot of people, they didn't know that they could say no, or they didn't know that they could resist,
Yeah,
and they were forcefully taken away. Like, you know, I've seen pictures of kids getting grabbed and dragged and carried away and stuff like that, and
there were threats made to the parents, all kinds of, they used whatever method
that's
or
right.
weapon.
And most of the time, what they did was they did it during the day when the dad would be out working. So that, you know, like that's like you know, if you had, like in my family there was 8 of us, how could you defend somebody coming to take 8 kids away?
Yeah,
You know, it just,
it's tough, yeah, for sure. No, at some point, you ended up living on the streets in Vancouver, right?
yeah. I was 8 years old, and this is way back in the 60s. I was 8 years old, and we were living off the streets in Vancouver, me and my brothers and sisters. And we did that for near as we could figure over a year.
But how did that happen? Because you were supposed to have been in the system, like in somebody's home.
Well, what we did was we basically lied. Whenever a social worker talked to us, we made it sound different or better than it was, and luckily we got away with it, because the funny thing is we preferred to live off the street, stealing out of gardens and fruit trees, than get put in another foster home. That's how bad the foster homes were, that we'd rather live off the streets than get put in another foster home. That's why we lived off the streets for over a year.
That couldn't have been easy for sure, either way, but as
Well,
you
I was
said,
8 years old.
yeah, so
so
that's pretty young.
we're stealing out of gardens and we're
Yeah.
stealing out of fruit trees. And then I thought about it the other day, because a lot of people talked to me about this, and I thought, there's only fruit and vegetables only part of the year.
Yes,
So, you know, there's all the fall and winter months where we wouldn't have had anything. My brother was older, so he would go downtown to what they call the downtown east side now. He would go downtown and he would roll a drunk or rob a drunk. And the funny thing is our best meal, if you could call it that, was we would break bread up in a bowl and pour milk on it, and if we were lucky, we'd have sugar put on it.
Right.
And that was our best meal when we were little kids living off the streets.
Yeah.
I was talking with my younger sister not too long ago. She didn't realize that that's how we lived because she's younger than me.
Oh, okay.
And she said to this day she can't stand bread with milk or sugar on it. And I go, well, that's because that's all we.
Yeah,
that was our best meal when we were kids. But she said she can't stand it now.
Right. Now, at some point, now you go home to the reserve, where you're from originally. So, what was that like for you?
A lot of them, they didn't know. They didn't know what happened. When I moved back to the reserve, they asked me what happened to me or where I went, and I always tell people I'm honest, and I always tell people that they shouldn't ask me a question if they don't want to hear the answer. And all of my cousins asked me what happened or where I went, and I told them. So I would tell them stories about what I lived through and what some of the things that happened to me, and they would sit there just crying, hearing what happened.
Yeah.
And I said, "You're crying just hearing it." They go, "I lived it."
Yeah. Absolutely, yeah. It's kind of interesting to me that, like I may put a post on Facebook about how a lot of us whites didn't know a lot of the details about the 60s school. We may have heard the term, but really didn't know about it. And somebody was a little bit, not offended exactly, but they were wondering, why aren't you posting the positive thing? Because they knew somebody personally who was white who took in a foster child who was Indigenous and took good care of them and helped them find their families later on. But that was like one incident of something good.
That's also their perspective.
Well, of course, yes, of course. That's, without a doubt, that is, but for them that was a positive. And one of the remarks too, which I find incredulous, is she also said that had those foster parents known the details, they wouldn't have taken the children, taken them away from their families. And I don't know if that, like from what you're saying.
Well, they do know because they're told not to let the kids go home, and they're told not to tell the kids where they're from.
Right.
They're told all that up front.
So this perception that this person has is totally...
They're lying.
Well, I'm not sure if she herself is lying. She didn't do it. She wasn't one of them.
Well, it's perspective, though. Like,
yeah.
I still keep in touch with a couple of the homes that I was in. And oddly, they think they were really, really nice, and they think they were really, really good.
Mm.
I have one foster sister. She's a little bit older than me. She calls me brother and bro all the time now, and yet when I grew up, she wouldn't have given me the time of day.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And I think it's funny that now that we're, that like this was like 55 years ago.
Yeah.
She wouldn't give me the time of day back then, and yet now she's calling me brother and bro and all that, and I'm like, did you grow up in a different house than me? I thought we were...
we weren't enemies.
Yeah, we were brother and sister when I was growing up.
One of the things I want to make sure people know is, despite all of this crap, this abuse, this horrendous lifestyle you were forced into, you became a businessman. You built your own. You have your own home that you built, right?
Yeah.
Eugene has he has his dried fish business, smoked fish business.
Yeah.
And he also is caterer. Went to university to get his chef.
Yeah.
Right? Did that as well. So like, you can overcome, but you don't lose. I don't know how to explain all of this. Is what I'm trying to say. Like you can get past some of that stuff, but it's still all has to still all be there all the time.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's getting closer to 60 years for me now, and there isn't a day that doesn't go by I don't think about it.
Yeah.
The thing is you have to heal from it, and you have to try to move on. It's always still there.
Right.
It's just like if you break your arm, yeah, your arm heals, but it's going to bother you all the rest of your life.
Yeah.
How much you let it bother you is your choice. You can walk around with a sling and never lift anything and say, well, it hurts when I do, or you can try to do things.
Yeah.
And basically that's what I try to do is I try to say, well, I want to be productive. I want a better life than what I had.
Yeah.
So I work hard at it, and there are some good things that you take away from everything. No matter how bad they are, you do take away some good things. Like, you know, to me, if I'm 15 minutes early, I'm on time. I'm not early.
Yeah.
You know, I have to work hard to get anything I want, and in a way, I probably got that because of the homes I was in.
Yeah.
But, you know, I like to have nice things now because I never had anything growing up.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people, they come in my house and they go, oh, wow, look at your big TV, and oh, look, you got a new truck, and oh, look, you got this, and they say lucky, and I go, no, I'm not lucky. I go, I work hard for everything I have.
Yeah,
and
nobody handed it to you.
that's right.
Yeah.
You know, when I was 16, nobody gave me a car, and
Yeah.
well, I didn't graduate high school, but if I did, I wouldn't have got a car or anything either then, like
Yeah.
a lot of kids do.
Right. Now, here's an interesting thing that you encountered just recently, and I just want to bring that up, even though it's nothing to do with the 60s scoop, but it's to do with white people's beliefs. You recently met a guy, you were talking to him, he sounded like a nice man, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and then what happened? At some
He
point-
just turned on a dime, and he just started making all sorts of racial comments. And I don't know, I thought he was the nicest guy. I met him in the lineup I kept bumping into him actually at Walmart. And then I ran into him in the lineup at Walmart, and he seemed like the nicest guy. He's a little bit older than me, but he seemed really, really nice. And then he started saying stuff about the residential school and the 60s scoop, and he didn't believe that all of those bodies that they've been finding are real. And I'm like,
That's incredulous.
I couldn't believe that he even said that to me. And he said that we should all just go back to the way we were and quit complaining. And he made quite a few real racial comments. And the sad thing is I always tell everybody, like yourself, you never know when you meet a new friend.
Yeah,
And I'm always open to meeting new people or friends. That's how we became friends.
yeah,
And I thought the same with this gentleman. I thought, wow, he seems really nice, and
yeah.
I actually like older people a lot because I always say I can learn from them. They got more history and teachings or culture than I do. So I thought, wow, maybe I'm making a new friend here. He seems real nice. And then when he started making those comments, I thought, wow, you really can't tell some people.
You can.
To say those kind of things in a public place, even where other people could hear you.
The amazing thing to me about that is this is like current information. He could go to those locations and find out for himself. You know, okay, you don't have to believe everything you read or everything you see on TV, but you can go and actually see those places,
Well,
right?
you can't make up finding bodies. and then he was trying to justify it. And I said, well, I lived in a lot of cities, Vancouver, Langley, Aldergrove, Seattle. I lived all over in foster homes. And they go, not one school that I go to had a cemetery.
No.
And I go, every residential school has a cemetery. I go, kids don't die at school.
Yeah.
And if you're away from home and you pass away, well, they should bring you home so that your family can take care of you properly.
Yeah.
And death and funerals is a very big thing in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of families, they lost their children and never got to do the proper ceremony to send them away to the other side,
Yeah.
or even know that they died.
Yeah, yeah, that's another thing. They didn't even know what happened to
Yeah.
them, whether they're alive or
And
dead.
My
That's,
latest count that I've researched, they're over 10,000, and yet they're not even halfway through all the schools yet.
wow, it is so unbelievable. You know, I think I went to 5 different schools in my lifetime, and there was never one cemetery.
Yeah.
Not one.
That was another thing, is being in foster homes all over. Literally every school I went to, I was the only Indian in every school.
Was that right, eh?
So I got into a lot of fights. And back in the 60s, if you got in a fight, you got a strap. And then you
Yeah.
got sent home. And then back then, you're allowed to beat your kids. So I would get beat up at school just for being Indian. Then I would get a strap for fighting. And I would get sent home, and then I would get another strap for getting kicked out of school, or so getting a strap at school. So I literally got beat up 3 times in one day.
Yeah.
And this would happen like at least once a week or every 2 weeks, all throughout elementary school.
Right. Another thing I want to let people know, like people say it's over, it's in the past, but there's still, to this day, things being done to First Nations people everywhere.
Yeah, like there's certain stores that have floor walkers that watch for shoplifters. I walk in those and they're on me like ugly on an ape.
Right.
You know, I walk around the store and I get so frustrated. I feel like opening my wallet and say, "Look, I got money. I can pay."
Yeah.
You know, but you know, same as restaurants. You know, I had a white girlfriend. She was very beautiful, so I wanted to treat her really nice. So I would take her to nice restaurants, and they always stuck us way in the back or near the bathroom or something, and they take forever to take our order. And until I was with her, I literally never knew that you actually got offered more cups of coffee while you're having your meal.
Right.
Like, I never knew that. I never heard of that. You know, when she was there, they come and they go, "Oh, do you want another coffee?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. You know, like, how much does that cost?" And
Yeah.
they laughed at me. They go, "No, they're free. They don't charge you for refills." And I go, "I've never had a refill." I go,
Yeah.
I don't know if they charge you for them or not. But she used to get in a fight, and she'd want to talk to the manager every time we went out somewhere.
Oh my gosh.
Because she said she'd never been treated so bad in her life, and I said, "That's how we're always treated."
Another thing I mentioned to you, I believe, I've said it to you, I'm sure, is that, like, personally, if I see you being abused, if I'm somewhere and I see somebody mistreating you because of your First Nations, it's up to me to say something to another white person, you know, because I think coming from you, it is not going. Obviously, it's not going to have the same effect.
That's right.
It should, but it doesn't, right?
That's the thing that I find amazing even today. Is like, you're a very beautiful woman, you're a good friend, and then there's other people like that man I met the other day,
Yeah.
and I go, I can't believe that there's open-minded and good-hearted people, and then there's people like that man I met, and I go, there's like night and day, and I go, how people can be so different, I
Yeah.
just can never understand it.
Well, it's interesting to me too. You know, I was interviewing somebody who's a drag queen, and I was talking to him about people's sexual orientation and other people judging them because of that, and I don't understand that either.
I don't get that either. Like, I don't care if you're gay, I don't care if you're
Whatever.
transgendered.
Yeah.
Like, any of those things, like, to me, you're either a good person or you're not.
Yes.
And whether
Yes.
you go to church or you don't, or whether you're an athlete or you're not, or whether your sexual preference or not, to me, none of those have anything to do with if you're. The bottom line is you're a good person or you're not.
Yeah. Now here's another interesting fact, folks. A lot of you white people will go to tanning salons, go sit in the sun to get tanned, and yet you'll judge somebody like my friend Victor because of the color of his skin. That is no logic to me.
I always thought that was funny.
There's no logic to it.
Even when I was a little kid, I always thought that was funny that they used to call us dirty Indians because we're brown. That's what they called us back in the 60s.
Wow.
And then they're all, like you said, they'll be all laying out in the sun like this trying to get tanned. And I go, "You're trying to look like me." And then a lot of them would do that too. They'd go, "Oh, I'm almost as brown as you." And then I thought, well, you're almost as brown as me, and yet you insult me.
Yeah.
And then you lay out in the sun trying to get tanned.
Yeah, right, yeah. And we're going to end it there. So I hope, to all of you viewers who are watching this out there, I hope you share this video. I hope you take in some of what Eugene has said. Like, really take it in and really listen. I'm talking to you white people, okay? You know? You of colonial descent.
Get to know somebody.
Yes. Don't make judgments before you actually know that person.
That's one of the things I like most about Nancy is she really gets to know people with all her interviews.
I love that. I love getting to
And
know
I've never
people.
seen any judgment in her at all.
Well, first of all, somebody, you know, here's an interesting thing before I end this. I don't recognize First Nations people unless they tell me they're First Nations. I don't know why.
You can't tell I'm an Indian?
No, I can't, honestly, and I told you this before. I don't know why. And I asked, are they First? I have to ask people. I don't ask them personally, are you First Nations? Well, I might, but I honestly don't understand how people know automatically that you're First Nations, you're an Indigenous person. Like, I don't get that, honestly. And that must be something weird in my brain because I just don't understand it.
I think more people should be like that. I'm the same way. I don't see, like, until we talk about issues like this,
Yeah.
I don't see you as a white woman.
Right, yeah.
I see you as a very beautiful woman with a good heart, very intelligent, and very humble and non-judgmental.
I love people to be people.
And that's what I see. I don't sit there and go, well, I'm going to go see my white friend today. No, I'm going to go see my friend Nancy. Like, I don't put labels on people.
Yeah.
Same as the gay, or same as people that go to church, or same as whatever.
Yeah.
I don't say stuff like that.
Right.
You know, to me, you're, like I said, you're either a good person or you're not.
A good person or not. So think about that, people. And thanks for watching the show. And take care, everybody. And peace out. If I can turn this off.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community where you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's the place to be, you'll see.